Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is certainly my honor to appear at this very important event marking Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I know we're going to hear from a great lineup of speakers, but if I could just take a moment and introduce a couple of my partners who are in the room. First, we're in his district, so he deserves recognition. My partner on the City Council, Councilman Michael Nowakowski. Thank you, a great champion as well. And if I know anything about the most cutting-edge ways to fight domestic violence, it's because I served with the #1 champion in any domestic violence that I have ever interacted with, and that's former Councilwoman Peggy Bilstein, who is here. Peggy, did she have, oh, there you are, great. Thank you for taking the time to educate me and be a better leader on this critically important issue. Look, we know domestic violence affects every city in our region. In the city of Phoenix, it affects every neighborhood, every socioeconomic group. No matter your nationality, no matter where you come from, domestic violence affects everyone. And it affects, of course, the most the victim of domestic violence. But it also affects everyone in that person's universe, the children in that family, the parents, the friends. It affects children's education. It affects our workforce in terms of lost person hours in the workplace. The bottom line is, unless we get our hearts and minds around this issue and our resources around this issue, we can't achieve our goals as a city of Phoenix, our goals as a region. And so the bad news is that domestic violence, unfortunately, still plagues our community. The good news is that some of the smartest, most innovative people I know are actively working on ways to end domestic violence in our region. And I'm confident we are going to get there. Domestic violence calls are some of the most common calls for service by not only the Phoenix Police Department, but every police department in our region. They are the most dangerous and the most costly for law enforcement. When a police officer in the middle of the night gets called on a domestic violence call, he knows he's headed into a hot situation where violence has already occurred. Who knows what weapons may be on site. We have incredible police officers. The bravery and courage that they display cannot be overstated. In the city of Phoenix alone, we average 42,000 domestic violence calls, generating 12,000 reports every year. The volume of these reports is overwhelming, and limited resources make it impossible to adequately respond to every single one. There has to be a better way, a more collaborative way to approach this issue. It's an issue for all of us, not just public safety. I want to publicly thank the dedication of Lieutenant Robert Bates and the leadership of our brand new Phoenix Police Chief, Daniel Garcia, who have developed new protocols for responding to domestic violence. Chief Garcia, thank you for being here. Let's give him a round of applause. We appreciate your leadership. Officers are looking for controlling behaviors and patterns of violence in addition to signals of physical violence. These indicators allow resources to be focused on the cases most likely to end up in the most serious incidents of violence, even homicide. These protocols are saving lives and making the very best use of our police resources. Local prosecutors estimate that 80% of domestic violence cases are dismissed, most often because the victim has recanted. When we get a victim who is willing to fully participate in the investigation and prosecution, 90% of those cases end up with a conviction. The victim is, of course, safest when the abuser is behind bars. The key to delivering justice is having the victim actively involved. And the key to having the victim involved is having a quick and efficient justice system and trial. The City of Phoenix's protocols are positively impacting how quickly domestic violence cases are prosecuted. Improved investigative techniques provide important details that prosecutors need to move cases in a timelier manner. And increasingly, our prosecutors are putting and keeping the abusers behind bars. Our work aligns with the regional efforts of the Maricopa Association of Governments Protocol Evaluation project. And I'm actively involved with MAG, and I'm very proud of MAG for many reasons, but one of them is that they have made ending domestic violence in this region such a high priority, and getting the cities to work together, and our police departments and prosecutors and social service agencies to work together. At this time, it is my honor to bring the next speaker to the podium. She's the mayor of Avondale, our friend Marie Lopez Rogers. She is currently chair of the MAG Regional Council, but it should also be noted that Mayor Lopez Rogers is a national leader. She is first vice president, I think it's the title, first vice president of the National League of Cities, and before the end of this year, she will be voted on by all of her colleagues, which is every city council and mayor from around the country. She will be president of the National League of Cities, the first Latina to hold that position. So she is making us proud and making history in our country. So next to the podium is our friend, our leader, Mayor Marie Lopez Rogers.
Thank you so much, Mayor Stanton, for the introduction. And certainly thanks to all of you for being here today. Domestic violence can't be ended by one group or one person. It takes all of us working together. I'm encouraged by seeing all of you, so many people from different agencies and lines of work. I'm honored to work alongside of you. We all need to be part of the safety net that ends domestic violence. That's why I supported the development of the Southwest Valley Advocacy Center, a sister agency to the center we're in today. As mayor of the city of Avondale, I made the center a priority for my hometown, as well as for the Southwest Valley region. Forming partnerships among law enforcement, social workers, and the cities of Goodyear and Buckeye was not always easy, but it was absolutely essential. Today, a woman can come to one place and receive help she needs to start rebuilding her life. We are better organizing our work so her life can start again more quickly. Thanks to the leadership in this region, we are no stranger to innovation. When I started serving on the MAG Regional Domestic Violence Council, it was one of the first and among the biggest of its kind in the entire country. This multidisciplinary approach has resulted in landmark activities like the Youth Empowerment Project, and most recently, the MAG Protocol Evaluation Project. Many thanks to the Governor's Office for funding both projects. The Protocol Evaluation Project is making the way we arrest and prosecute domestic violence offenders more consistent and based on best practices. As the chair of the MAG Regional Council, I support this project because I understand our cities will save lives, money, and critical resources if we can coordinate our approach to domestic violence through the criminal justice system. This is important to my fellow mayors from other cities too. We are all searching for more effective ways to reduce the trauma and cost associated with domestic violence. This project provides that solution. As a steward of the public's money and trust, I know regional coordination is a wise investment. We cannot afford to work in silos. What we do in law enforcement affects prosecution, the jails, social services, businesses, places of worship, and our neighborhoods. While working together is the only way we can succeed, cities are sharing training, new policies, and even staff to enhance their response to domestic violence. We are all better for these efforts. A new partnership is bringing this work to the next level. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor has made addressing domestic violence a priority through the Avon Program for Women and Justice at the O'Connor House. We have joined forces to better support victim advocates and the critical work that they do. This collaboration has resulted in new tools that have never existed before in this region. So here to talk more about this important partnership is Lucia Howard, co-chair of the Avon Program for Women in Justice. Ms. Howard graduated from Harvard Law School and has practiced law for more than 20 years. She co-founded the Arizona Women Lawyers Association and founded the Arizona Center for Women and Law. Please help me welcome Ms. Howard.
Unfortunately, I've been practicing law for more than 30 years, but thank you.
You don't look old enough. No.
I wish.
That's impossible.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Rogers, and thank you everyone for attending today. We at O'Connor House appreciate the opportunity to work with MAG and with you and the rest of the partners in the room to try and end this devastating problem in the United States and in the state of Arizona. You've all heard the statistics before. Across the country, and Arizona is no exception, 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence. 1 in 5 teens will experience dating violence. More than 50% of 911 calls in a lot of our communities are related to domestic violence. This is unacceptable. But as Mayor Rogers said, the solution doesn't lie with one person or one system or one organization. It lies with each of us. Each of us that are in the room today, and more importantly, all of us that are not in the room today that we need to reach out to. We have to keep speaking out against domestic violence, not just in October, but throughout the year. And we have to continue to speak out against domestic violence until every elected official, like the great ones that we have here today, all of our courts, all of our law enforcement officers, and every person in our community is willing to say, I stand with the victims and I stand up against the perpetrators. Through the Avon Program for Women in Justice, we at O'Connor House are dedicated to working with all of our community partners to help develop solutions to this devastating problem. It's not our goal at O'Connor House to start a shelter, even though I understand that a lot of people thought that O'Connor House was a shelter. O'Connor House is not a shelter. We're not a new organization that wants to provide services or come into the picture to give solutions that have been debated for the last 30 years. What we want to do is we want to work with our partners to leverage the resources that we have in the community now, to bring new resources to the programs, to bring our government and community leaders to the table to seriously talk about how we're going to put an end to this process. And most importantly, to do it through a civil and consensus-building process. We're also different from some organizations because we are action-oriented. The reason for this is simple. Justice Sandra O'Connor does not sit around and talk. She is very impatient with process that doesn't lead to action. So our goal in the community is to partner with government, elected officials, law enforcement, the business community, service providers, to try and take those solutions. And we do have solutions. Solutions have been identified in any number of projects. And to actually bring them to fruition, working through partnerships with organizations that already exist in our community. We've done a number of things, and we're proud of our partnerships in the area of domestic violence, and one of the largest is community awareness, also awareness and training with the media. We are working on a project to bring more volunteer lawyers to represent domestic violence victims. We are very proud to have the police chief of Apache Junction co-chairing a task force to streamline protective orders, which is something that both law enforcement and victim advocates have been doing for years. And I think we're right around the corner from having some consistent protocols. We're also working on training, not just for judges and lawyers, but for others in the community. And we hope to be doing a shelter study with the Morrison Institute at ASU to talk about who does and doesn't use shelters, and if they choose not to use shelters, what is their portal for services. So all of these things are very exciting, but today I'm here to talk about one of the most exciting projects we're working on, and that's our partnership with MAG. In the last probably 2 years in dealing with MAG and a lot of the other partners, a lot of the experts in domestic violence keep saying our #1 underutilized, undertrained solution to domestic violence is victim advocates. Victim advocates already exist. It's not a new thing. They exist in police departments, fire departments, court systems, prosecutors' offices. But what we haven't focused on in the past is that a lot of these victim advocates go into the field without training. We focused on a lot of training for police officers, for prosecutors, for judges, for psychologists, but these are the first responders. They're often in the field early with the victim, and they're the ones that have the most contact with the victim throughout the process. And in my 30-some years of practicing law, I know how important it is to understand the legal process if you want to get anything done. So these victim advocates help in two ways, and both of them are highlighted here today. One way is in the criminal process. Victims are necessary in the criminal process in order to be able to prosecute the offenders. That's just the way it is. But it's a scary situation. It's a very threatening time. It's the most dangerous time for a victim. Victims can't stand alone and be expected to face attorneys and cross-examinations and depositions to bring abusers to justice. They need help. That's one of the important roles the victim advocates can help in if they are properly trained in the judicial system. The second area is on the civil side of the law. I think a lot of you have heard the horror stories about victims of domestic violence then being sued for divorce, being sued for child custody, having to go in shelters and being then told they're unfit mothers. You've heard it over and over again. It's victim advocates who can help victims in this process to find their strength, because they are the most vulnerable people in the society, but they are also potentially the strongest people in the society, because they can take what has been heaped upon them and turn it around into a productive and happy life. But they need help. So we're very proud of the partnership that we have with MAG to try and determine what are the needs of victim advocates and what can we do to support their work. We have sponsored 2 surveys that we were very fortunate, with the help of MAG, to get to about 180 victim advocates across the state of Arizona in all different disciplines to find out what are their needs. The number one need was training. There are victim advocates who literally go into the field without 1 day of training on the job before they're put into these dangerous situations. That's kind of abuse on a different side. And so that's something that MAG and the O'Connor House are now going to be focusing on to see what we can do. Justice O'Connor firmly believes in this work. She actually is the one who chose domestic violence when Avon Foundation gave O'Connor House a grant for $250,000 in order to start a Women and Justice project. Justice O'Connor did not hesitate. She wanted that money spent on domestic violence because she understands how big a problem this is and how, as we've heard, we can't solve it in silos. We have to all step up, work together, and take the best practices that have been discovered and put them in the field. So I thank you all for having a similar commitment, and I want to introduce you today to a very amazing woman who for 4 years suffered excruciating torture at the hands of her boyfriend. When she finally was able to break free, he tormented her from afar. Drawing on her strength and the support of a victim advocate, she was able to make a new life for herself. So she's here to tell us firsthand about the role of victim advocates. Help me welcome and honor Terry.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry, and I'm a survivor. I'm thankful to be alive and have this forum to share my story. I'm unable to describe everything that I've been through. That would take many, many hours, if not days. But I hope that standing here today, no longer hiding behind the cloak of fear and secrecy, will prompt others to do the same. My relationship with my abuser is a classic example of the domestic violence cycle. A blind date with a man who presented himself as the perfect mate, showering me with love, adoration, and gave me his complete attention. What I did not realize, that this was his way of gaining my trust and loyalty. I began to confide and trust, unknowingly providing him with intimate knowledge that later on would be used to harm me. Over time, I became isolated from friends, family, and completely financially dependent on him, which is how he wanted it. I no longer existed. I was now his possession, and suddenly the relationship was filled with verbal abuse, intimidation, psychological torture, and threats. In fact, one of his favorite activities was to describe to me in great detail what would happen to me if I left him or notified police. He would cut my body into small pieces and scatter them on 40 acres of hunting land his family owned in northern Wisconsin. But first, he would do it to my children and force me to watch. Physically, I have had a gun to my head, a knife to my throat. I have been choked, drugged, sexually assaulted. Over the span of 4 years, I was caught in a web and did not know how to escape. There are no words that exist in the English language to properly describe the level of fear that I was living with. Finally, I became brave, confided in family members, and we immediately began developing an escape plan. It took 2 months to accomplish. It had to be perfect, or I'd be caught. That morning, when I knew he would be away for an appointment for at least 2 hours, as he pulled out of the parking lot, my friends and family pulled into the parking lot, and we threw everything we could into trunks of cars and sped away. 3 days later, I stepped off of a train in Arizona with 6 cardboard boxes, a bicycle, very little money, and my life. Immediately, threats and harassment began to anyone he thought would have knowledge of my whereabouts. Using my personal information, he was able to track me down. He has filed false criminal charges against me to elicit a response from me. He went so far as to contact a local police department here in Arizona, call them hundreds of times. And through intimidation, an officer was actually dispatched to me, the victim, with a message from my abuser, although the department knew of my situation as I had reported it to him the first day I arrived. I had a uniformed officer appear to deliver a message stating that there was a significant amount of money available to me if I returned to him, and if I chose not to do that, he would come to Arizona and find me. Imagine my perception of law enforcement at that moment. Since fleeing Wisconsin, I have had 9 addresses, 5 telephone numbers, and an unlimited number of cell phone providers. I don't even know how many. I've worked 2 minimum wage jobs 7 days a week, walking to work, taking my bicycle, and riding the bus to get back and forth in hopes of reestablishing a life. He used technology to follow and track me, and I was in constant and exhausting fight or flight mode. He created false profiles on adult websites, posting pornographic photographs of women who bore a likeness to me. But he provided my real information, my home and work address, my home phone number, and my work phone number. I began receiving calls, pornographic images at work, and on my phone. I can't begin to describe what that felt like. Not only was I being threatened by my abuser, I was now being threatened by other predators, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. In January of this year, after nearly 2 years of his stalking behavior, I once again went to the police. That was prompted by being confronted at work regarding unwanted mail, packages, letters arriving at my place of employment for me. I also received hundreds of emails containing pornographic photographs of him dressed in women's lingerie in the form of emails at work. He would then follow up by shipping the lingerie he was wearing to me at work. I'm sorry. I was made aware that these emails were also delivered to others within the organization and asked if I was encouraging and participating in this behavior. I left work in a daze, completely humiliated, unable to look anyone in the eye, ashamed and intimidated. I contacted the Chandler Police Department and began to tell my story. This time, I was listened to, and immediately an active criminal investigation began. Within 2 days, I arrived and went to the Maricopa Superior Court. That is where I met my first guardian angel. She listened and instantly understood, held my hand as I wept, helped me complete documents, escorted me to the proper courtroom, and sat behind me in the gallery as I was granted an order of protection. She remains at my side today. She is dedicated and passionate about the work she does. I'd really like to thank her in this forum. Her name is Elizabeth Clements, and she is a court advocate at the Maricopa Superior Court. Thank you so much for what you've done. Shortly afterwards, I met my second guardian angel. Jean Watson is a crime victim specialist with the Chandler Police Department. I don't even know where to begin to acknowledge and thank her for all she has done for me. Her strength and knowledge helped me maneuver the legal and judicial system that brought 2 states together with one common goal, and that was to hold my abuser accountable for his actions. She established a network of communication between detectives, the district attorney, and another crime victim advocate in Wisconsin. She coordinated the service of the order of protection and prepared me for what would likely happen next. She was right. Within hours of being served, my abuser began violating the protective order. Local police were able to take him into custody and begin to gather evidence so that he could be charged with more substantial crimes. In April, she sat and held my hand after I was picked up by detectives and taken into protective custody after my abuser managed to arrange a murder-for-hire plot. Although incarcerated, he wanted to stop me from testifying, and he also threatened to harm my children. Throughout this horrible ordeal, I was being threatened with a lawsuit by my apartment complex and told I was going to be evicted if I did not pay my rent. Although they knew of my dangerous situation, they refused to acknowledge. I'm sorry. Although they knew of my dangerous and horrible ordeal, I was threatened with a lawsuit. Although they knew, they refused to acknowledge it and claimed my story was fictitious. Jean put me in touch with an attorney to help me understand my rights. Ultimately, the leasing company changed their mind, but I was forced under duress to sign a legal document barring me from ever speaking of the event. Shame on them. I was victimized yet again. I'd like to thank Jean. She's also here with us today. I wouldn't be here without her. These two women remain at my side to support me in my recovery and assist me with upcoming court actions in my case. It is because of them that I'm standing before you today. I can't imagine where I would be at this moment without them. Ultimately, my abuser was charged with over 60 crimes, including 7 serious felonies. With a plea arrangement, he pled no contest to felony stalking and 2 counts of victim witness intimidation with threat of bodily harm. Although many charges were dismissed, they were read into his plea agreement with an Alford plea, meaning that although he is not acknowledging guilt, he is acknowledging to the court that enough evidence existed to have found him guilty. That allowed the judge to consider those dismissed charges as she formed her decision on sentencing. 5 weeks ago, I stood at his sentencing hearing, supported and surrounded by loving family and friends. I delivered a victim impact statement in a strong, powerful voice in the same room with my abuser. The judge listened to my words and more than tripled the state's sentencing recommendation. He was sentenced to the maximum amount of time allowed by law, with the judge's added statement that she wished she had the power to sentence him to an even longer period of incarceration. My abuser now resides in a maximum security prison facility without the opportunity of parole. He is denied access to computers or any internet connectable device. His phone privileges are restricted, and if allowed, they are listened to by corrections officers. I will never be free of his obsession to destroy me. As long as he is incarcerated, his abilities will be limited. I want my life back, and I'm learning more about myself every day. Thank you for this opportunity to share parts of my story.
I don't even know how to follow that. Wow. What an incredibly courageous woman Terry is. And I'm privileged to work for A New Leaf, which is the program that runs the court advocate program that Elizabeth works for. My name is Dana Martinez, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about victim advocacy and how important it really is. As you heard from Terry's story, domestic violence is a pervasive problem that can have devastating effects and long-lasting results. Domestic violence is defined as a pattern of behavior that includes, the use or threat of violence and intimidation as a means of controlling someone or exerting power over them. However, society seems to mainly focus on the physical aspects of abuse and doesn't seem to fully understand that there are many elements of coercive control that can be just as devastating. Just as we heard from Terry's story today, instances of economic abuse where she was forced to lose jobs because her abuser kept contacting her employer, emotional and verbal abuse, including name-calling, put-downs, manipulation and trying to make someone feel like they're crazy, coercing someone to do something that they wouldn't normally do by using phrases like, "But if you love me, you'll do it just this once," or "That's fine, I'll just go get someone else to do it then." Isolating them and making them feel captive in their own homes and threatening them not to tell anyone. But we cannot be silent about domestic violence. We've collectively gathered here today to recognize Domestic Violence Awareness Month and to get the word out that abuse is never okay and that there is help. There are advocates across many disciplines to help those experiencing domestic violence. Advocates do play a critical role in helping victims access safety options through the proper resources. I'd like you to take a moment and think about the last time you had to go to a courthouse or a police station. Did you feel a little overwhelmed, maybe a little intimidated, especially if you're a Joe citizen like me and not an officer or an attorney? Now imagine if you were a victim and you were in crisis. Maybe your life had just been threatened, or maybe you had been badly beaten, and you were told you had to go get an order of protection or go file a police report. You're not sure maybe what that even means. How do you feel now? Do you feel a little intimidated and overwhelmed again? This can be a daunting and even frightening process for many of our victims. And unfortunately, there are advocates to help people navigate through these complex and sometimes challenging systems. Advocates are trained to provide services from a victim-centered approach, meaning that we are here to help and assist individuals based on their individual needs and specific to their unique situations. This strengths-based approach supports the person's right to make choices for themselves while being offered the appropriate resources and options. Statistics do show that the sooner a person can get connected with an advocate, the more likely they are to follow through with their case. As victims begin to develop a sense of trust in their advocate, they may begin to see that they do indeed deserve safety and freedom, and that offender accountability is a function of the criminal justice system. In these cases, they are more likely to assist with arrest and prosecution, and in doing so, they do begin to build trust in the systems that are there in place to protect them. They begin to realize that they do have value and they do have worth. Their lives do have meaning. They do have rights, and their voice is important. Advocates are an integral part of helping victims navigate through systems, helping them develop trust through safety planning and offering resources and referrals that other system personnel may not be able to offer. We are open to collaborating across disciplines and to coordinate a variety of services. We offer a wealth of information and resources and are passionate about the work we do and very often go above and beyond to help those in need. If you are experiencing an unsafe relationship, we want you to know there are options available for you. You do not deserve to be abused. You have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. You have the right to have safe and healthy relationships where you have a say in your own life. You deserve to have a choice, and like Terry, you deserve to have a voice. Thank you for giving us this opportunity, and now it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Barbara Marshall, who is chair of the Regional Domestic Violence Council for MAG.
Thank you so much, Terry, for sharing your story with us. Thank you for having the courage to hold your offender accountable. And thank you, Dana, for showing us how important victim advocates are. With advocates like Dana and these other fine women who were acknowledged by Terry today, victims are much more likely to pursue justice for their offenders, like Terry did. As a prosecutor with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, I've seen perpetrators of horrible crimes be released because victims, for whatever reason, did not participate in the justice system. We know from hearing Terry's story and from hearing stories like that so often that abusers use intimidation, they use threats to get their victims to not cooperate. Without the testimony of victims, unfortunately, many cases cannot be proven and result in dismissal. When this happens, victims may continue to live in fear of further abuse, and offenders are free to re-victimize them or others. Connecting victims with advocates early in the process can provide the support they need to participate in the court process and to hold their abusers accountable. As chair of the MAG Regional Domestic Violence Council, I'm very proud of the Protocol Evaluation Project. When we started this project, there were 106 different ways of arresting and prosecuting misdemeanor domestic violence crimes. We now have one regional model that recommends consistent practices for arrest and prosecution. It includes 28 streamlined protocols based on best practices. This coordinated effort, which included technical assistance, training, and help with implementation, will result in saved lives, saved money, and saved resources. But we certainly could not have achieved these goals alone. The MAG Protocol Evaluation Project collaborated with the Governor's Office, the O'Connor House, A New Leaf, to conduct extensive research into how to support the work of victim advocates and connect them with victims earlier in the process. This has resulted in the development of innovative tools to help make these connections. And this is a tongue twister. They include the Domestic Violence Victim Advocates Provider Inventory, an interactive web map, and a mobile application. These tools will help save lives and reduce costs associated with prosecuting domestic violence offenses. The Domestic Violence Victim Advocates Provider Inventory, is it up on the screen by any chance? Well, you can check it out on the web. Okay. This serves as the region's first comprehensive directory of agencies that provide advocacy services to victims of domestic violence. The interactive web map takes this information and displays it in map form, allowing users to identify victim services closest to them. Terry, for example, would have been able to pull this up on the internet, click on the blue dots, and figure out where the closest victim services to her were. Additional features include a quick escape button in case a perpetrator happens to discover that someone is looking at this, links to domestic violence shelters, and the ability to view the information in both English and Spanish. A mobile application will allow users to access this map from any location, making the information available anytime and anywhere. We hope you will all participate in the various domestic violence awareness activities planned through the month of October. We invite you to join us for the Protocol Evaluation Project training that occurs on October 24th, and I believe there are copies of the regional calendar at the registration table. On behalf of the MAG Regional Domestic Violence Council, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Mayor Stanton, for being here. Mayor Lopez-Rogers, Lucia, Terry, thank you so much. Dana, thank you for being here. We also want to thank the Governor's Office, the O'Connor House, A New Leaf, and our other community partners for supporting the work of the MAG Regional Domestic Violence Council and the Protocol Evaluation Project. Thank you, Joanne, for hosting us today. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce, to wrap us up, I think, former Phoenix City Councilwoman Peggy Bilstein and the first chair, I believe, of the MAG Regional Domestic Violence Council.
Thank you, and I will try and keep this short, but as a recovering politician, sometimes it can be a little difficult. Wow, Terry, you are a brave soul, and I am at a loss of words when it comes to describing the gift that you gave us today, putting a face behind what it's easy to quote numbers. And I don't know what your abuser got, but I hope it was a long time. I really do. And I don't know what's in store for you, Terry, but I know it's something great, because you don't take the steps that you have to even do something like you have today that will affect so much change in other people's lives. So I just really want to encourage you and thank you for the gift of your story. So thank you, Terry. I also want to thank my good friend, Mayor Greg Stanton, for being here, and Councilman Nowakowski, and actually, I'm just so proud of the city of Phoenix. I'm so proud of Maricopa County and the state of Arizona, because I remember some years ago when this wasn't an issue. You know, and so for those of you who sometimes get discouraged saying, how many more times do we have to tell this story? What is necessary for this to happen? Unfortunately, it took a horrific death with Laura Nunez, which so many of you remembered, where this a wonderful woman went for shelter and there was no room, and unfortunately was murdered by her abuser. And how proud am I that I sat on a city council, and at that time I was the only woman. And these guys, and I know you hear a lot of things about politicians, but we may have disagreed, but they were really like my older brothers. And they really got it. They understood that this wasn't a social issue. If anybody tries to tell you it's a liberal social issue, that's baloney. This is a public safety issue. If it is the #1 reason that women are murdered in our country, it is a public safety issue. And I pray that it continues to be on the top of the public safety budget when it comes to protecting our families, our children. These babies see what's going on, the mom. They know what's happening. And we have had police chiefs in the city of Phoenix who have supported us since the very beginning, and I am so very thankful. I see so many heroes back there today of Phoenix police, and we heard of Chandler and Mesa and Surprise, and what a wonderful county, man. I mean, people are really getting it. So when you're discouraged, take a look at how far we've come, and I know we have a lot of work to go. I don't know if Assistant City Manager Ed Zucker still here? There he is. You know, I want to thank Ed. You know, things don't happen, whether it's budgets or advocacy centers, without buy-in from our staff, with leadership. They have to really believe in it. And I remember Ed worked on this with me when Ed was an intern, and we were working on you know, in transit and other issues, but this has always been a piece of your heart. And Councilman Nowakowski and our mayor, your wives, are very involved in this issue. And I appreciate this because this is a family issue. And then I look at our champions around this room, and I see Lucia Howard, who, you know, I'm just, by this time you would think she would hang up the phone or have call block when my phone comes, when my number comes on. I'm very blessed. She's never said no. She was a co-chair of a human trafficking task force where we have set some things in motion to protect our children and laws, and we continue to do so. And Kim Sterling, who is just relentless when it comes to sending us information and emails on how we can make a change. And I mention this because it's going to take all of us. And all of us who are in politics knows what happens when our public starts calling and saying, what are you doing? What kind of money are you putting behind this? What protections are you doing? And so I just really want to encourage Mr. and Mrs. Smith out there. This is not about somebody else. I guarantee you, you will know somebody who this affects. And what I know about the state of Arizona is when we put our mind to something, we change it. We can affect change. And I just really want to encourage the folks here, but also people, the reporters and you folks who are here. Please report this as an action-oriented press conference. We can create change. And how about if we start without victim blaming? And if those of you who don't know what victim blaming is, it's this thing that when somebody says, well, why hasn't she left? Why isn't she prosecuting? Why aren't these things happening? Well, let me tell you about the sweet, precious women I have had the privilege to hold their hands when their abuser has said, we will kill you. You go up, I will take your children. And if you don't think it will happen, at the Family Justice Center upstairs that I'm privileged to be a part of, one of many, many women, but one woman who was so brutally abused, and when it came, that the police got her and her children to safety in an incredible shelter, the judge took her children away from her because she was in shelter, and he said that was not an appropriate place for her to have her children. So when the next time you ask a woman why she's staying in there, you better be prepared for what you might hear because it will blow your mind. So as we have all these cards on the table and so many different opportunities, I would also encourage that we do some judicial changes because we need to make some changes. Whether it's local, whether it's JPs, whatever it is, we need to make some judicial changes. And I am so very thankful for Joanne Del Calle and incredible people here at the Family Advocacy Center who has made this a wonderful, safe place for people to come and get help. And Joanne just doesn't do that. She understands how important it is for counseling. Somebody's not going to go up and be able, in their moment of trauma, and make decisions, whether it's a police report or anything else, until we can wrap our arms around them and help them with a little bit of counseling. That's a passion of hers. And if you want to know about some incredible victim training material, Joanne Del Colli has been working on this with the Victim Assistance Academy. Is that the right word? For so many years, that so many of our people who walk alongside these precious, precious women like Terry have gone to that and understand how important it is. So I thank you all for being here. I thank you all so much. I thank Terry, and when you think of Terry, I want you to think of how many other women are just like that. Don't look at that number. Put that person's face there. And together, we can end this awful, awful issue. Thank you for being a part of this, and God bless you.